Hi, I'm Reva Goujon, and these are some highlights from Stratfor's third quarter forecast. Trade frictions are going to be high this quarter, especially with NAFTA talks going south, the White House imposing additional tariffs and investment restrictions against China, and now an additional threat of tariffs against automobile imports. Now, we will see some tariffs shake out by the White House against China this quarter. We're also going to see retaliatory measures by U.S. trading partners targeting primarily U.S. agricultural and industrial goods. Now, we don't think that those trade battles, while they're escalating, are going to result in an all-out trade war. And really the distinction there is when you have multiple rounds of tit-for-tat measures with no clear end in sight. We think we're averting that worst-case scenario. But the rising tariff threats, the threat to NAFTA, and this distorted White House national security argument are altogether going to galvanize a congressional response to try and reclaim their trade authority from the executive. Now, whether they actually get a veto-proof majority to do anything is another question entirely. We are cautiously optimistic about the North Korea talks. Now, there will be drama, of course, but there is a strategic foundation that gives this negotiation some staying power. Now, temper your expectations. There won't be instant denuclearization, nor will there be instant security guarantees for North Korea. What we could see, though, are the beginnings, the etchings of a political framework for then the very sticky technical details to follow over a long period of time. Now, even though the United States is locked into this emerging great power competition with China and Russia, it's actually polarizing many of the allies that it needs in that competition. So when we're looking in particular at secondary sanctions against Russia that are targeting Russia's energy and defense ties, we'll be watching this quarter for heavy pushback from countries like Turkey, Vietnam, India, and Germany. So we now have a Eurosceptic government in the core of the EU in Italy. And while the government is going to lay off the more extreme threats of withdrawing from the Eurozone for this quarter, giving some calm to the markets, we are still going to see an escalating battle with Rome on the one side, along with allies it's going to be seeking out in Southern Europe, against Brussels and Berlin on the other side over fiscal deficit rules. Now, while we have heightened political risk in Italy, we're also watching closely those deepening divisions within the UK, both within and between the cabinet and the parliament, in which those divisions are working in favor of the parliament and trying to steer the country toward a softer Brexit to try to remain in the customs union. So this is the quarter when many countries are going to be trying to negotiate waivers with the White House in return for reducing their oil imports from Iran. Saudi Arabia would rather take a wait-and-see approach toward the markets, especially as it's eyeing a higher oil price nearing the $100 a barrel mark in anticipation of its IPO of Saudi Aramco. Now, the White House, especially this close to midterm elections, is going to be leaning very hard on its Saudi ally to make up for any supply gaps and coordinate an intervention as needed. Russia will desperately try to break out of a stalemate with the U.S. this quarter. Watch as Russia uses the threat of military buildups in Poland and Belarus, ongoing sanctions pressure, arms control talks, as well as its mediation in Syria between Iran and Israel, all as ways to try to force this dialogue with the United States. We're not holding our breath for any breakthroughs, though. It's a big election quarter for several emerging markets, and we're looking at Turkey and Mexico in particular. So first in Turkey, in June 24th elections, Erdogan's electoral gamble is looking very precarious, but he likely has the institutional tools to eke out a win, to put down protests, and spin any outside criticism on the vote in his favor. In Mexico, we're looking at July 1st elections, and the populist candidate there, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, is doing extremely well in the polls to the point where he could even have a very strong showing in Congress. That's going to raise investor risk at a time when NAFTA uncertainty is already beating down the peso.